After reading 200 self-improvement books, these are 21 lessons that I am so happy that I know now, but I wish I had known much, much sooner. These are the key, most influential lessons. Number one, everything starts with awareness. It's all about controlling your attention and your focus, but what does that actually mean? Here's a perfect example of what awareness looks like. This is you, and this is your awareness. You get a little bit of a beam of light like you would with a flashlight, and you get to point that wherever you want to focus your attention. You can focus that internally on yourself, external factors like your phone. This is your awareness and this is your attention. That is the most important thing. Time and attention. You could have all of the time in the world, but if you're just all over the place and scattered and not paying attention, all of that time is basically lost. A lack of self-awareness is poison. Reflection and review is the antidote. Awareness is like turning the lights on in all of the darkness and giving you a way to see. Sometimes you can't see really, really far into the future and you can only see a few steps ahead of you, and that's okay. There is nothing more important to true growth than realizing that you are not the voice of the mind. You are the one who hears that. Number two, you have one true freedom in this world, and it is choice. Choice is something that nobody can take away from you. And this isn't just deciding like, hey, I want to eat this for dinner, or hey, I want to do this today. It's much more nuanced than that. And it's the choice that you have to your reaction to anything in the entire world. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. To choose one's own way. No matter what happens, the worst in the world could happen, but you will still have a choice in how you respond to that. Ultimately, no external force can decide that for you. You will always have that power. This leads me to number three. You need to take 100% responsibility for everything in your life before anything can change. Now, when people hear that, they're like, well, what about this? And this happened to me. And yes, tons of things in life are outside of our control. Horrible things happen all of the time. There's a difference between fault and responsibility. If you were born into horrible circumstances or somebody you love gets sick, it's not their fault. However, it is your responsibility to make the choice in how you respond to that. You cannot take complete control of your life without taking responsibility first. If you don't take responsibility, the world will choose for you. If you want to really change your life, or if you want to change or help or do anything in life, you need to take responsibility first. The more we choose to accept responsibility in our lives, the more power we will exercise over our lives. Accepting responsibility for our problems is thus the first step to solving them. We all love to take responsibility for success and happiness. Hell, we often fight over who gets to be responsible for success and happiness, but taking responsibility for our problems is far more important because that's where the real learning comes from. That's where the real life improvement comes from. To simply blame others is only to hurt yourself. Values are your North Star. I talk a lot about this. It's about having values and principles. These are so important. They're your foundation. Who do I want to be? And this isn't habit-based stuff. I do disagree with some of those things in Atomic Habits and identity-based habits because I think that gets people confused, but you need to figure out the values you want in life that are focused internally. Do you want to be honest and truthful? Then you need to decide that that is one of your North Stars and let that guide your life. Do you want to have integrity? That means, at least to me, always doing what you say you're going to do. And this doesn't have to be some huge thing. It just means I always have to do what I say I'm going to do. If I say tomorrow I'm going to go for a walk, then I go for a walk. It's that simple. The ability to subordinate an impulse to a value is the essence of the proactive person. Reactive people are driven by feelings, by circumstances, by conditions, by their environment. Proactive people are driven by values, carefully thought about, selected, and internalized values. This is about suffering, and it's number 5, and it is the cure for pain is meaning. It means we are all going to suffer. There is a famous Buddhist idea of life is suffering, and it means pain is coming, challenge is coming, suffering is coming. It's universal. It's the nature of life. It's part of being alive. The antidote to dealing with that is to find meaning in it. So it's all about how you apply meaning to whatever is happening in your life. And again, this goes back to taking responsibility for things in your life by giving them meaning that is useful. Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible. Life is going to ask that from you. It's coming for all of us, and you have to apply the meaning that is important. Number 6, you have multiple minds. We have, as Daniel Kahneman says in Thinking Fast and Slow, we have 2 different minds, System 1 and System 2. Mark Manson refers to them as the thinking brain and the feeling brain. And I even add a third one, which I call the rationalizing brain. The thinking brain and the feeling brain are like, okay, tomorrow we're going to go ahead and exercise. And the feeling brain is like, yeah, all right, we're going to feel great. Thinking brain is all about it because it's good for you. And then the next day, 24 hours later, when the time comes, somehow there's a new brain. It's like a switch on the thinking brain. And it's like, wait a second. We don't really want to do this. And it starts to give you all of these amazing ideas to get out of it and talk you out of it. So you have to figure out what is doing the talking. We think that we view the world in a certain way, but we're biased and we confirm things that we want to, and we only see what we want to see, and we miss things that we don't want to see. And eventually you will see that the real cause of problems is not life itself. It's the commotion the mind makes about life that really causes the problems. It's all the commotion that your 2 different minds and all this argument and this rationalizing and the thinking and the feeling and the emotions that's causing all of the problems, because underneath it all, there are technically no problems. Number 7, your body is the warehouse for all of the things that happen to you. It stores all of the emotions and memories that you feel over time. This is one of the biggest lessons I learned, is understanding how emotions work and how we interpret them. When something happens, just like our brain predicts the future to save energy, our body will predict emotions, and we kind of put those together, and it's constructing our experience right in front of us. Typical self-help books focus on your mind. If you think differently, they say, you will feel differently. You can regulate your emotions if you try hard enough. These books, however, do not give much consideration to your body. Your body and your mind are deeply interconnected. Interoception drives your actions. Your culture wires your brain. So I think it's important to really understand your emotions. If they just kind of come up, the best you can do is give them a different kind of language and interpretation, which is why we talked about when you feel some pain and suffering, applying a different interpretation, giving that a different meaning can change your life entirely. Number 8, your mind and your body are one integrated system. You'll hear a lot about this in the self-help space, and it sounds like your mind is one thing and your body is another, but they are not. And it's very helpful to see them as just one unified system. So it goes both ways. How you think affects your body, and how your body reacts to certain situation affects how you think. And a great way to look at this is maybe you've gone on a date with somebody, right? It's a first date, and you have this kind of feeling in your stomach like butterflies. So it could be when you meet them that you have these butterflies and it's this instant attraction, it's a spark, and that's why you're feeling that. Or it could just be that you're anxious and you're nervous, but the feeling is very, very similar. And they say this about fear as well, and I know I did this when I did my stand-up comedy bit of, you get this emotion. This could be fear, or this could be my body preparing me to do something that is difficult so I can grow. When you start to look at things in a way that you're like, this is something I'm choosing to do that will make me stronger in the long run, changes everything. And you have to truly believe that if I'm going up on stage, if I'm going to embarrass myself and nobody's going to laugh, it will make me stronger. My mind, what is it? What am I making of it? What am I using it for? Is it empty of thoughts, isolated and torn loose from those around it, melted into flesh and blended with it so that it shares its urges? 9, your environment shapes you, but you also shape your environment. And this doesn't get talked about enough. Your environment is important. If you're surrounding yourself with people that aren't inspiring you, aren't helping you, you're going to become like them. If you're in a place where, you play video games and at the same time you try to do work, it's going to be difficult for your brain to separate those two things. But if you can realize that your location, the people around you, your culture shapes those things, you can take control of them. Your personal experience, therefore, is actively constructed by your actions. You tweak the world, and the world tweaks you back. You are, in a very real sense, an architect of your environment, as well as your experience. Number 10, science-backed meditation. I am not a big fan of this visualize and manifestation in the way that it is sold to a lot of people, where they believe, hey, I can just sit in a chair, close my eyes, visualize it, feel it emotionally, and it's going to happen. It can work, but it is a short-term solution. It's called the reticular activating system or confirmation bias, and your brain will start to see and pick out things that you focus on. I prefer more of the science-backed approach, which is saying the more we focus on something in our minds, the more we actually start to see that in reality. So the idea is something like this: when you're looking for a new car and you're like, hey, we're gonna go buy a new car, we want a blue car, and you just start to see those more often. And you're like, oh, look, they have one. But the thing is that those cars have been there all of the time. Nothing has changed. However, the fact that you're focusing on it, it will start to seem as though those things are appearing more. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. It starts in your mind, truly. You have to believe these things are possible. If you really believe you can't do something, of course you can't do it, right? You're gonna quit. But if you believe that you can, it doesn't guarantee that you can just by thinking about it. However, it makes it more possible and more situations will appear in your life. 11, you are the only one standing in your way. So this is a lesson that comes over repeatedly, of that you are really the only one in the way, and your fears are all in your head and they're all imagined. I don't think it's always fear, but a lot of times it is. We're afraid of change, we're afraid of getting laughed at, we're afraid of seeing someone might see us failing, and the social idea of we are social creatures. I think some of that is true, but there's also other parts to that. We fear discovering that we are more than we think we are, more than our parents, children, teachers think we are. We fear that we actually possess the talent that our still small voice tells us, that we actually have the guts, the perseverance, the capacity. We fear that we truly can steer our ship, plant our flag, reach our promised land. We fear this because if it's true, then we become estranged from all we know. We pass through a membrane. We become monsters and monstrous. We know that if we embrace our ideals, we must prove worthy of them, and that scares the hell out of us. What will become of us? We will lose our friends and family, who will no longer recognize us. We will wind up alone in the cold void of starry space with nothing and no one to hold on to. I love that one. I get chills just thinking about it. Okay, nothing is stopping you from having all that you want. Sure, it's going to be hard. Sure, it's going to be difficult. And it's wild when you see that. The other side is terrifying, because then you realize, oh shit, I can do all of this stuff. And who knows what will happen, but I have the potential to do that, and that is scary to see. Figure out what it is, put a name to it. You could even talk to it. Whatever that fear is, maybe it is you are afraid of people laughing at you. Cool. Start to identify it, and then you can talk to it and figure out what it is and what it means to you. You don't become confident by shouting affirmations in the mirror. You become confident by having a stack of undeniable proof you are who you say you are. And that's from Alex Hormozy. And I love that idea of you can sit in the mirror and just shout it. I used to have Post-its up all over the place, and I really believed in these things, and you feel them emotionally. And this goes back to the manifestation. But if you don't have the action, you need the proof in reality. You need to have stacks of you are who you say you are. If you're someone who wants to exercise all the time, you can't just think about it and imagine that. You have to have these little bits of proof that you are actually going to do that. And the more ways you can figure out that works for you to get there and do that, the more proof you will have. 13, find the why that justifies the suffering. And here again is the common theme of suffering, and it goes back to this idea of why. So we talked before giving meaning to the pain, but how do you do that? And this is where you choose a why. Most people say, when you choose a why, it has to be something external. Like maybe somebody you love is sick, and that'll drive you, and you'll never quit on figuring out a solution or a cure for that. Whatever that is, something that drives you. Maybe you're a mom or a dad, and you want to do this for your kids, right? That's a driving force. That's a why. But I would also argue that sometimes the why starts with yourself. Most people I see who struggle with so many things, it's about accountability. They don't have accountability, and they look for it externally, right? If they can't go to the gym, they're like, oh, I'm looking for an accountability partner. Sure, these things work. I'm a big fan of having accountability. You can pay somebody money, and if you don't go do that, right, your money goes to a charity. The issue is, if you don't have accountability with yourself first, then just having an accountability partner is a short-term solution. It'll work, but not the whole time. So it goes back to, what is your why? It starts with principles and values that you determine are so important for your life that you never want to let them go, and you kind of make them like laws. And once you have that, then you have a why that you can go bring out into the world. To live is to suffer. To survive is to find meaning in the suffering. 14, deep work, finding flow and what you love. And this one is kind of controversial. You need to find your way of doing work. Maybe it is you just play around every day for a month, but then when it's time to grind, you can grind it out for 2 months straight, not missing a day. Or maybe you have to disappear somewhere and go off into a cabin somewhere to do whatever it is that you do, right? And to figure out your way of deep work. And I know this kind of gets shit on a lot of life is suffering, and a lot of this list is about suffering, but ultimately, if you are truly enjoying what you're doing and you're having fun, then you don't need motivation, right? People are always looking for motivation, or they're like, I'm procrastinating, but you're not. You are doing what you want to do. If, let's say you're sitting there watching Netflix and you're like, oh, I'm procrastinating, I need motivation. You don't. You have motivation to watch Netflix. You aren't procrastinating, you are watching Netflix. You aren't procrastinating, you are doing exactly what you want, which means you don't want to do whatever that other thing is, and you need to find out why. You need to find out who you are first before you can decide anything else that makes you happy. If you want to win the war for attention, don't try to say no to the trivial distractions you find on the information smorgasbord. Try to say yes to the subject that arouses a terrifying longing, and let that terrifying longing crowd out everything else. Find something that you love so much and you can't imagine not doing it, where it's easy to say no to everything else. So number 15, clarity comes first. You need to set goals 2 years, 3 years, maybe even 1 year, maybe even 6 months away. It's more realistic in the world that we live in. I'm a big fan of sprints. Doing sprints 30 days and then seeing what happens. For others, it doesn't. Maybe they work consistently. Here, I'll do this, a couple days a week, and then I'll do this a few days a week, or they do priorities one at a time. Whatever it is, you need clarity on where you're going. It doesn't mean you're going to get there. And it isn't some big external goal. Like I said before, it starts with you. What is the clarity on who you want to be? What is that person? Once you focus on okay, this is the person I want to be, then the clarity aligns itself, and then you can pick a target and aim. You do need a target. You do need an aim. As Peterson says, we live our life through our aim. When you have an aim, everything kind of focuses that way, and that is truly important. But so many people are so lost today. You don't know yourself. You have to disconnect. You have to get quiet. You just need to start figuring out, remove this idea. Oh, somebody told me that. Oh, I've been watching videos and I believed I wanted to do that. Oh, I want to do this. That sounds fun. Oh, they can do it. I can do it. Oh, this is easy. That's not you. Remove all the dust and dirt and junk and just figure out what it is you want. And you probably don't even know still just by asking yourself. So then you're going to start taking small actions. If you can do it for joy, you can do it forever. You just find joy in the process of whatever that is, but it comes from clarity first. Who are you? Number 16, it's never too late. And to start, find your childlike wonder. You possess a kind of inner voice that seeks to guide you toward your life's task, what you are meant to accomplish in the time that you have to live. In childhood, this force was clear to you. It directed you towards activities and subjects that fit your natural inclinations, that sparked a curiosity that was deep and primal. The first move towards mastery is always inward, learning who you are and reconnecting with that innate force. Knowing it with clarity, you will find your way to the proper career path and everything else will fall into place. It is never too late to start this process. Following curiosity is a huge part of my life, and I believe that is the answer to everything. So not only do you have to get quiet and find out who you are, but how do you do that and get clarity? You just follow curiosity. So many of us know, I believe this, we know what we want. We're like, I'm curious about that. I want to try that. And then we hit that first roadblock and boom, stop. That voice, that rationalizer comes in, is like, no, you shouldn't do that. That's so weird. Why would you do that? Whatever it is, could be an old parent voice. It could be a friend voice, some imagined voice of someone you think judging you or they're going to fail. Whatever it is, it's that voice in there. That's why you're going to try and figure out what that fear is. Follow curiosity, and I truly believe you can't go wrong. Number 17, let go of the stories that are trapping you. You just have to figure out your beliefs and who you are. And yes, you do have to change your stories. And how do we do that? By taking actions that show us that we are that person. One of my favorites here is from Carol Dweck, and it's called Growth Mindset. But it's also a little bit more complicated than that. Growth Mindset basically says your brain can change no matter what. It comes by focusing on effort. So you focus on the effort and you can change your life. However, it's more nuanced than that. You have to first believe that that effort is going to help you. Then you think, hey, if I focus on the effort, I'll improve. So you really, really have to believe. If you're just like, if I try to start a business, it's going to work. Not true. You need to believe first, I'm going to try a business and I'm going to fail and it's going to be probably embarrassing and painful and I'm going to feel lost and sweaty and confused. But that stress is good for me and it's helping me grow. You need to believe that first. Then you can have the growth mindset of, okay, I continue to focus on the effort because it's helping me. And that's how you can grow. And that's how you change your story. You start there with believing stress is good for you. Then you can change. Then you start to take little steps in the challenging direction. The more sacred an idea is to us, that is, the more deeply it is tied to our identity, the more strongly we will defend it against criticism. The tighter we cling to an identity, the harder it becomes to grow beyond it. Number 18, everything is backwards and you can only let things unfold on their own. The rare people who do become truly exceptional at something do so not because they believe they're exceptional. On the contrary, they become amazing because they're obsessed with improvement, and that obsession with improvement stems from an unerring belief that they are, in fact, not that great at all. We see success and we're like, oh, these people just believe that they were so great, but it's actually the opposite. A lot of things in the world are just opposite or backwards from the way we see them, is that people become so successful because they believe that they aren't. Or you hear this idea, the more you try to chase something, the further away you get from it. Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you are going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. You start here, like, this is the principle. This is who I am. This is who I'm going to be. For example, I'm going to tell the truth, or at least not lie. What Jordan Peterson talks about. If you start telling the truth, that principle, try it out for 30 days. You cannot lie at all, ever, and just watch yourself. How many times you might tell a little fib or a little excuse or a little, even if you're like, oh, why didn't you go to the gym today? That first instinct is going to be to make that little excuse, but it'll be a lie because there is probably no reason why you didn't go to the gym today. And you start to catch those things. And that's why I think it starts with you, and then you can improve. 19, death is the ultimate teacher. One day you and everyone you love will die, and beyond a small group of people for an extremely brief period of time, little of what you say or do will ever matter. This is the uncomfortable truth of life, and everything you think or do is but an elaborate avoidance of it. We are inconsequential cosmic dust, bumping and milling about on a tiny blue speck. We imagine our own importance. We invent our purpose. We are nothing. Enjoy your fucking coffee. It sounds a little dark and depressing, but the reality is, for a lot of people, when you realize that, hey, this isn't forever, this really isn't, then you can appreciate what you have now. Sometimes it doesn't work for me all the time. Being 41, you would expect it to be like, okay, hurry up, go faster, but fear is still real. Procrastination is still real. Difficulties and challenges are still very real. However, if you can return back to this immediacy, like, hey, this isn't going to be forever, then you can motivate yourself a little bit more. And you can also see like, hey, maybe this isn't as important as I thought, and ultimately in 100, 200, 300 years, what I'm doing right now isn't really going to matter. So why don't I just make a video or help somebody down the street or go do that thing I wanted to do? Because really, It doesn't matter, but it can matter now. 20. Action is the only antidote. It doesn't take away from the fact that action is hard to do, so you have to use different tools. Again, I think it goes back to principles. Start with your principles, who you are, and then you can start taking action in the direction you want. You don't need writing classes or seminars any more than you need this or any other book on writing. You learn best by reading a lot and writing a lot, and the most valuable lessons are all the ones you teach yourself. You don't need another book. You don't need another video. These are fun and entertaining, and I hope this entertains you, and I hope you learn something from it. But you don't need it, because what you know is enough to start already, and that is going to teach you more than any video can ever teach you. Compliance is the science. You want to find a way that you can comply to whatever it is you say you're going to do. Doing what you always say. Find your compliance. You could use a motivational hack. You could get an accountability partner. You could use what I call the minimum acceptable action. You say you're going to exercise every day. You start off real strong, but you set a minimum acceptable action, which is the smallest thing. It prepares you for a day that you don't feel like doing it. So that could be, I walk 15 minutes. And that means on days when you're too busy, you don't have time, you could still walk 15 minutes, and that counts in your head as an exercising day. You just start anything. If you want to write a paper or a book, maybe you start writing a sentence, or maybe just start cleaning or doing something. Move, do something. 21, the final one, embrace uncertainty. And the best thing I've come across here is Annie Duke, her book, Thinking in Bets. And the idea here is just asking yourself and other people, wanna bet? This helps clarify where people are so certain, or you might be so certain where you're like, I shouldn't do that, it's not gonna work. Ask yourself, would you bet? Like, do you really wanna bet on the fact that that's not going to work? Life, like poker, is one long game, and there are going to be a lot of losses. Even after making the best possible bets, we are going to do better and be happier if we start by recognizing that we'll never be sure of the future. And I love this. It gives me chills thinking about it, is that really when you can grasp that you have no idea of what's going to happen, but yet we'll think and try to come up with the best solution. And something lately I've been saying to myself that's been so helpful is, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it anyways. And that has really removed so much stress and pressure, and I felt so great doing that, and maybe that'll help you. And here is a final bonus one, we'll call it 21A, and it is something I'm passionate about. Follow your biology. This means do what is right for you. I'm so tired of everything in this self-help space of like, this is the system, this system works for you. And it's making people have so many more problems than they would, because when they fail a certain system, they don't question the system, they question themselves. And that's such a huge problem, is that many people are like, you need to wake up at 5 a.m., you need to do this and you do this. And it happened to me as well, where I believed that this was the way forward. And then I did it and it didn't work. I couldn't be consistent and it was difficult, and I hated it running at 5 a.m. when it's freezing cold out and dark. It was just miserable. But I was like, that's the way forward. And all I did was question myself. I was like, why can't you keep going? What's wrong with you? Everyone else can do it. I never questioned like, hey, maybe that's not normal for everybody. Matthew Walker says this in his book, Why We Sleep, about there are night owls and there are morning larks, and the world is fucked for night owls. Find what works for you. Always take 100% responsibility, but maybe sometimes it's worth questioning the system before you judge yourself. The first step in healing anything is taking full accountability. It is no longer being in denial about the honest truth of your life and yourself. Something is wrong. And the longer you try to love yourself out of realizing this, the longer you are going to suffer. The greatest act of self-love is to no longer accept a life you are unhappy with. It is to be able to state the problem plainly and in a straightforward manner.